Did the old lady die? That's what the man asked, but it made me really mad. He was my ex-husband who left his blind mom to be with his new girlfriend. It's crazy to think he came from my kind mother-in-law. His words made me so angry. You must have had it tough too, right? Now you can do whatever you want, but I guess there's only so much an old lady like you can do. He laughed loudly and rudely, making it hard to show how mad I was. I just smiled back at him. Well, I actually just inherited $3 million, so I'm going to enjoy my freedom, I said, wiping the smirk off my ex-husband's face. He never thought he'd end up needing my forgiveness someday. My name is Grace, and I'm 63 years old now. I got married when I was young and moved in with my in-laws. They were kind people, but unfortunately, my husband turned out to be a big letdown. I divorced him when I was 53. At that time, our daughter Mary was 18, and our son Jack was 15. It was a tough time because we had to pay for their education, and I also had to take care of my blind mother-in-law. I met my ex-husband John at work. I was 18 when I joined the company, and he was 24, already a senior there. He seemed reliable and caring, which I admired. Despite being popular, he liked me and asked me out. When we decided to get married, I met his parents. His dad had trouble moving around, and his mom couldn't see. I was touched to see John taking care of them while working. Even though my parents were worried about my future, seeing how much John cared for his parents made me ignore their concerns and marry him. My parents were upset and cut ties with me, but I was confident in my decision. Being young, I wasn't scared of anything. After getting married, I decided to quit my job so I could take care of my in-laws and manage our household. My husband, John, was grateful for this arrangement as it allowed him to focus on his work. My in-laws treated me like their own daughter and always showed appreciation for what I did. Even though taking care of them was challenging, their kindness made it easier to bear. John worked late every day, so I believed everything was going smoothly at home. One day, while at the grocery store, I bumped into one of John's former colleagues. We chatted about John and me, and the colleague mentioned how John always left work early because he was worried about me, which made him a great husband. I was puzzled because John usually came home late, not early. I thought it must have been a misunderstanding, so I just smiled awkwardly and agreed. When I got home, I brought it up with John, intending to subtly address the issue. But before I could finish, John got defensive and yelled at me, saying he was working hard and not just goofing off. He brushed off my concerns about his father needing more care, showing no willingness to help. This made me feel unsupported and frustrated by his reaction. I had a feeling something wasn't right, but I was too scared to confront my husband about it. I had gone against my parents' wishes to marry him, so I didn't have a backup plan if things went wrong. Plus, I was worried about my in-laws. So I just kept living each day as usual. Then, I had an idea to buy an electric wheelchair for my father-in-law. He was managing with a cane and a manual wheelchair, but with an electric one. He could move around more easily. And if I put my blind mother-in-law in the wheelchair and pushed her, we could go for walks farther from home. When I brought it up with my husband, I expected him to agree, but he wasn't too keen. He said we couldn't afford it with his income being tight. While it was true that we weren't wealthy, I felt the wheelchair would bring joy to my in-laws, so I suggested borrowing money from the bank and repaying it later with their pension. My husband reluctantly agreed, warning me not to cause trouble. I couldn't tell my in-laws exactly what he said. But when I mentioned we could borrow from the bank, my father-in-law was thrilled. So we went to the bank together, got a loan, and bought the wheelchair. My in-laws were overjoyed with their new mobility aid. Not long after, my father-in-law passed away, leaving me and my mother-in-law deeply saddened. But instead of offering comfort, John complained about the debt from buying the wheelchair. His words made me feel guilty, especially knowing my mother-in-law likely overheard. Now, it was just me and her at home. With her blindness, she could handle some things on her own, reducing my caregiving duties significantly. Around this time, John suggested we have children. I was unsure about his intentions, but I hoped it meant a positive change. We ended up having 2 children, but unfortunately, John didn't become more involved with household tasks even after they were born. My days were a whirlwind of chores and childcare. Despite it all, seeing my mother-in-law happy brought me comfort, especially when she heard the laughter of our children. After my father-in-law's death, we managed to find some happiness, but there were signs our marriage was struggling. John seemed distant, always late coming home, and showing little affection for my mother-in-law or the kids. He even started working on his days off, with no joy on his face. I began to accept that as long as he provided financially, maybe that was enough. Our marriage wasn't perfect, but our children grew up to be good-hearted and honest. Our family faced a big change when our daughter turned 18 and was heading off to college. On a Saturday, which was supposed to be a day off for John, he announced he was going to work. I had to remind him that he promised to take my mother-in-law to the hospital for her checkup. This was something we had planned for a few days, and it was also the day our daughter was moving into her college dorm. But John snapped at me, saying it was my job as a housewife to take care of such things. He claimed he needed to help our daughter set up for college. This outburst surprised me, and I couldn't believe he was being so insensitive. I'd never talked back to him before, but his attitude made me furious. He seemed taken aback by my reaction and continued to argue, saying hurtful things about why he married me in the first place. His words stung, and I felt regret for ever marrying him. I couldn't bear his insults anymore, so I simply told him to stop. I realized I couldn't expect anything from him anymore. He seemed satisfied that I didn't argue back and left, saying I should take care of my mother-in-law and the kids. After that, he never came back home again. It was a painful realization that our marriage was falling apart. In the end, I had my eldest daughter take care of her dorm move-in while I accompanied my mother-in-law to her health checkup. Despite the absence of my husband, we managed to get through the day. Everyone noticed he didn't come back, but nobody spoke about it. A few days later, a letter arrived from him, containing a divorce notice and a message stating he was leaving to live with his lover. He also mentioned he didn't want to be involved in the debts left by my in-laws and that we could live our lives as we pleased. I felt exhausted and realized I would be happier without him. Before filing for divorce, I informed my children and my mother-in-law about the situation. My mother-in-law was deeply shocked and apologized repeatedly while crying. She expressed her intention to move out, feeling like a stranger now that we were getting divorced. But I reassured her, saying she was just like my real mother and the only grandmother my children knew. I insisted that we were still a family and didn't need to worry about our future. Despite her tears, she thanked me for my words. However, I couldn't deny my worries. Even though my husband wasn't perfect, his financial contribution was still valuable. Now that he was gone, I felt uncertain about our future. I desperately searched for a job, but nobody would hire me because I had been a housewife for many years. Both Mary and Jack offered to work, but I felt like I had to find a way to support us. However, my mother-in-law surprised us by telling me not to worry about working and to focus on going back to school if I wanted. She assured me that she would take care of everything. We were puzzled by her offer, but she insisted, and our lives continued without any major changes. If anything, it felt like we could live more comfortably than when my husband was around. I decided to file for divorce with the help of a lawyer. My mother-in-law wanted to report him missing, but I had no desire to see him again. Surely she must want to see her son, my ex-husband, I thought. But even after she reported him missing, my ex-husband was never found. About 2 years ago, my mother-in-law passed away to join my father-in-law. Sadly, she never got to reunite with my ex-husband during her lifetime, even though he's her son. I felt like I should contact him, but when I tried to find his address, there was nobody living there. Reluctantly, we held a small funeral for my mother-in-law with just the three of us. And now, unexpectedly, my ex-husband stands before me. I saw him while I was out shopping alone. At first, I thought I had mistaken him for someone else and tried to ignore him, but he kept staring at me. It's probably not a mistake, I thought, deciding to ignore him, but he persisted, saying, "Grace, right? You're as glum as ever. How rude." The woman next to him laughed softly, adding to my irritation. Just as I was about to walk past them, he said, "Did the poor old hag already kick the bucket?" I stopped in my tracks, glaring at my ex-husband. "Who are you calling a poor old hag?" I asked sharply. He smirked and replied, "You know who I mean, right? Your blind mother-in-law. Heard she passed away. Must have been tough for you, but hey, now you're free to do whatever." Well, within limits, I guess. His crude laughter grated on my nerves, but I knew showing anger would only give him satisfaction, so I forced a smile and replied, "Actually, I inherited $3 million, so I don't have to work anymore. I'm enjoying my freedom, thanks." The smirk on his face disappeared at my unexpected response. "See ya," I said, turning to leave. But he seemed stunned, calling out to me hurriedly, wait a minute. An inheritance of $3 million. What are you talking about? He asked incredulously. What am I talking about? I mean exactly what I said. Thanks to your disappearance, I was able to inherit smoothly without you in the picture. I replied with a hint of satisfaction. My ex-husband's face went pale. You're kidding me. I'm her son, right? I didn't hear about any inheritance. I should have a right to get a share too, he insisted. I couldn't help but smirk. Well, technically yes, but you were gone. Did you know that after 7 years of disappearance you are considered legally dead? I said, enjoying the turn of events. What? So your mother-in-law's inheritance was willed to me, your eldest son, and eldest daughter. You have no role in this anymore, I asserted confidently. My ex-husband looked utterly bewildered, and I had to resist the urge to burst out laughing. I now understood why my mother-in-law had urged me to file a missing persons report after she passed away. A lawyer representing her estate appeared and explained everything to me. It turned out that my mother-in-law's family were landowners, but she had cut ties with them, much like I had with my own family. However, she still had the right to inherit. When her parents passed away, she inherited without telling anyone. Thanks to this unexpected windfall, we were able to live without financial worries. I once asked my mother-in-law, Mrs. Young, how are you managing your money? If it's a pension or something like that, please use it however you like. Her response was simple yet profound. I'm using it as I please to live a happy life with my family. And that's exactly what we did. I knew the money my mother-in-law had wasn't from a pension, judging by how freely she spent it. But it was definitely hers. Even though we were struggling financially, we decided to accept her generosity gratefully. Her inheritance was far more than she could ever spend in her lifetime. The only problem was my husband's presence. If something were to happen to her, he would inherit everything. But she didn't want that. During a consultation with a lawyer, my husband vanished. She thought he had finally cut ties with us. While she was sad to leave us, she planned to move into a nursing home with assisted living and use up most of her inheritance so she wouldn't leave any problems behind. However, my eldest son, eldest daughter, and I all expressed that we saw her as family and wanted to continue living together. This brought her immense happiness. Wanting to pass on her inheritance to us, she followed her attorney's advice and filed a missing person report for my husband. Following the law, my husband left home, and after 7 years, he was legally treated as if he had passed away. 1 year later, when my mother-in-law passed away, her inheritance was passed on to her oldest son and daughter. Even though I didn't have a right to inherit in place of my husband, my mother-in-law made sure to include me in her will. Thanks to her love and foresight, we were able to receive her generous legacy. Because of her, your mom paid for all of Jack's and Mary's school fees and living costs. That's why we could live happily. I thanked my ex-husband for leaving. When I said this to my ex-husband, he looked really surprised with his mouth wide open. He deserved it. Later, my ex-husband contacted me, saying he should get some of the money from the inheritance. I couldn't believe how mean he was after all these years, but legally, there's no inheritance for someone who's officially declared dead. I've told him this many times, but he still wants to argue about it. I spoke with a lawyer about my ex-husband's request to inherit. The lawyer explained that to inherit anything, my ex-husband would need to go through several legal steps, like canceling the missing person report. Usually in cases like ours, grandchildren end up inheriting the estate. We had no plans to give my ex-husband any money. I told him exactly what the lawyer said. If he wanted to inherit, he'd have to pay inheritance tax too. When I mentioned all these procedures to him, he went quiet. Our kids were there too, and we talked it over. I can't take time off work. I can't deal with all these legal steps, and I shouldn't have to pay inheritance tax. You guys should just give me my share. I helped you all out, so you owe me this much. My ex-husband argued. I was really upset by his stubbornness. It turns out he's just working day-to-day jobs now and can't even afford to take a day off. The company he worked for when we were married let him go because he was always absent. When I asked why he left his job and why he's struggling financially, he admitted he owed money to an old flame. He's been doing odd jobs and moving around a lot to pay off his debt. I get it, he insisted, but even with his explanation, I couldn't make sense of it. So things didn't work out with that other woman, huh? Then who was the woman you were with the other day? I asked. She's the one I've been searching for, my ex-husband mumbled quietly. When I heard this, I couldn't help but burst into laughter. My oldest son, my eldest daughter, and I were stunned into silence. Shaking my head at his foolishness, I told my ex-husband, "You're not young anymore. Stop acting like it." "She's my true love," he insisted. When he said that, I realized trying to reason with him was pointless. After reconnecting with my ex-husband, I discovered where he lives now. Turns out, he's staying in an apartment in the nearby town. But it's in his girlfriend's name. My oldest son ended up buying the entire building and became the landlord. "We have the money Grandma gave us. It didn't make sense to leave it sitting there," my son explained. Investing in real estate seemed like a better idea. Initially, I thought he wanted to assist his father, but that wasn't the case at all. Instead, if the rent is even slightly late, he's quick to demand it. The previous landlord might have been lenient, but my son doesn't operate like that. "You've caused your mother more than enough trouble. You selfishly picked this path, so you should face even more hardship than she did," my eldest son declared. It seemed like my son's way of penalizing his father, who had never been much of a dad. The kids surely had their own opinions about it. Perhaps that's why he couldn't handle this situation anymore. My ex-husband came to our house, pleading for forgiveness. "I'm truly sorry. I neglected my duties as a parent and a partner, Grace. I was wrong," he admitted. I couldn't help but let out a sigh as I watched my ex-husband's desperation. But I also had my own life to focus on. "Can't you talk to Jack and ask him to give me a break on the rent?" He looked so upset when he asked, my ex-husband pleaded. "If you had been a better father to our kids, maybe you wouldn't be in this situation, failing as a son, a husband, and a father. What do you have left in your life now? What was it all for?" "You need to seriously think about that," I responded. My words left my ex-husband speechless, and he walked away without saying anything. He looked so small as he left. Eventually, my ex-husband got kicked out of his apartment because he couldn't pay the rent. His new place seems to be in an old building where it's chilly and drafty. He's still living day to day, taking whatever jobs he can find. On the day we reconnected, he apparently ended things with the woman he was living with when he left our apartment. It seems he was covering her living expenses even after he got kicked out for not paying rent. I suppose it couldn't be helped. Instead, he should probably be grateful that his girlfriend stayed with him for as long as she did. She was young and maybe didn't see his true colors, much like I did when we were together. As for us, we're doing really well now. Thanks to my mother-in-law's money, as my oldest son suggested, we invested in real estate and stocks, so we have a steady income without having to work too hard. We even have time for fun things like traveling every month. Plus, my eldest daughter, Mary, is getting married. Her fiancé is wonderful and treats her wonderfully. Our family and happiness are growing. I'm savoring the joy of today, which we achieved by overcoming our past struggles.